This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Deb Coviello on the show. She is an advisor, author, and podcast host. She's the founder of Illumination Partners and the author of The CEO's Compass and the host of a Drop-In CEO podcast. So we're going to talk about all those things, plus a little bit about, actually a lot about leadership and just improving our general ideas and concepts and things that we need to improve on as leaders. Anyway, we'll get into all that later. Deb, welcome to the show.
Oh, John, I am so grateful to have the opportunity to talk to you and your community, and hopefully I can impart some insight.
I'm sure you can. Before we get started, let's just lay some context for the conversation. If you tell the audience a little bit about how you got to where you are today in your career and what is it that you do?
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you so much. I think at the core of all that I do, I am a problem solver. I hate chaos. And so starting at an early age, I did problem solve. I became a STEM professional, loved math and science. I was a biology geek, chemistry geek, and really went down that path and later went into engineering school. And yes, took all those hard courses, but really things started coming together for me as I was going through engineering when I was in an engineering lab and we had to solve some problems. We had to stack blocks with a robotic arm. We had to mix chemicals, heat them up, and then later dispense them, bringing together technology, both the computer programming and the physical act of making something from nothing was what really started getting me excited about a manufacturing career, for which after I graduated with a degree in biomedical engineering, I later went into various industries, including defense contracting, datacom, telecom, later in the chemical, flavor, and fragrance industry. But my true passion in those pursuits was quality and operational excellence, making things better, faster, cheaper, safer, and always being a problem solver. So obviously I am a Six Sigma black belt, lean black belt, have done the statistics. I understand how to solve really difficult engineering problems. But my true passion came later in my career as I moved up into a vice president of quality and operational excellence. The greatest opportunity for me was to take all the really, really, really smart technical people around me and how could I remove the barriers and elevate their skills for an impact? Because nothing is worse than seeing a talented technical person not be able to get their point across or get their message and be deflated because they just aren't successful making their point. And that was when I realized my leadership skills were far more valuable than me getting additional certifications in my technical area of competency. So fast forward, I was able to achieve great success as the head of a quality organization. But later, then I decided to form my own business because I wanted to do this work on my own terms. I've been working for very large multinational companies. I wanted to work with small and medium-sized companies, solve their technical issues and quality and operational excellence. But the brand, the Drop-In CEO brand, is really about elevating the people for a lasting impact, because as an advisor, a consultant, we can fix any problem that a business leader might have. But unless we upskill the people in the process, the consultant leaves and you can't sustain those gains. So that's really the passion work I love to do, for which I'm grateful to be on your show and speak to your community.
Yeah, I know when I think back about my first kind of leadership position, I realized that I didn't scale as a leader because of of getting in the way of my people, for the most part, because they wanted to grow and they wanted to learn and they wanted to improve on, but I was like the bottleneck because I felt like I had to put my mark on everything. My ego got in the way a little bit. Do you see a lot of that when it comes to leaders, especially when they get to that CEO or that C-suite type level, CIO, CTO kind of roles? Does ego play a role sometimes in that?
Ego. It manifests in different ways. It is when they start becoming a firefighter for which they have to, as you say, put their hands in on everything. And yeah, they will get the problem solved. But in the process, they've caused a lot of chaos. People will simply execute and not think. You haven't take the opportunity, while you may have had an ego and feel good at the end of the day that you've been the hero and helped solve the technical issue. You've done a disservice to your people because all they were doing was simply doing what you told them to do versus thinking and bringing solutions to you. And ultimately, for that leader, they will burn out and not be ultimately successful and have an underdeveloped team. So check your ego at the door for long-term success.
Easier said than done, but yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that I kind of have to think about every day. Like, when something annoys me, in the office, I have to stop and say, is that just my ego getting in the way? Or, especially when I feel like I was right on something, but the consensus was to go a different direction. Is it because I really feel I was right, or is my ego getting in the way? And I have to always check that and just say, is this just ego, or is it real?
Now, I would love to take this a little bit more. I mean, ego is a label, but could it be because we're such smart technical people, whether you're in IT, communications, what have you, we are paid, compensated, and celebrated for being an answer person, for having the right answer,
Correct.
raising our hands first. And it's an underdeveloped skill to sit back and listen to the collective feedback of everybody else and ask people, even if you know and you want to jump in and say, oh, I've seen this before, this is how we do it. It takes great discipline to hold back and ask questions of the team, because you never know. You might have had a good answer, but there could have been a great answering simmering amongst the people. So ego could also be lack of discipline and understanding how to pull knowledge from your people.
Yeah, I mean, that's really good. One of the things that I've, from a practical standpoint, that I've learned to do is whenever there's a brainstorming session or a problem solving type session where we're getting together, I always make sure, as the leader, as the boss, I'm going to speak last. I will never go in there and say, this is my idea. What do you guys think? Because that taints the entire room to where they're going to be looking at, oh, well, maybe we should make the boss happy and just, go with it. So I always want to hear everybody else give their take and their input before I, chime in. And sometimes I want to chime in at all. I'll just say, okay, I need to go marinate on this. I've got to, well, we'll have round 2 tomorrow. Let me think about all these ideas that came up and see where my thoughts fit now. Because, maybe my mind is completely different. Maybe change my opinion, or maybe I still feel strong, like, this is right. So let me think about and make sure that my approach is the best one.
Yeah, if nothing else, it's seeking validation. And it's funny, you talk about this. I recently was in a brainstorming session. We had a problem with efficiency and quality in a particular technical area for which I could go first. But, it's so much more than just bringing the team together and solving a problem. To your point, you said, I'll talk last and ask what people think in advance. What you're actually doing, the sub-agenda, is making sure that it's safe and expected for everybody to weigh in on a topic. It builds a more agile team, people to trust each other, get everybody's opinion out there, whether people agree with it or not. And then you can come in as the cheerleader, the person at the end that maybe summarizes or says, okay, this is a really good idea. And either it validates what you were thinking or you came up with something completely new. So really, it's focusing on those relationships and the interactions of the team towards an outcome of solving a particular problem or a brainstorming session.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, creating that, you may use the word safety, creating that safe zone where people can share ideas is the best way to solve problems. And that's what we do in IT too. We solve problems in technology, whether we're writing code, whether we're, securing a network or something like that. No matter what field in technology, our goal is to solve problems in one way or another. We have to be creative. We have to come up with creative solutions and figure out, how to make everything better. That's what we do. We don't make the products, you buy, make them better. I don't even know who's.
And I'll tell
I just stole was.
And I'll tell you, the smartest, most profound statements have come from the quietest people in the room. They too are kind of the quiet leaders because they'll sit back and they're listening and they're just waiting permission for them to weigh in and say, I believe this. And I'll tell you, in my last brainstorming session, those were exactly the things that needed to be said in order to move things forward. So don't
Yeah.
forget the quiet people.
Yes. And, one of the things that I've discovered is to listen for those quiet people, because when they speak up, it's usually important, and to pay attention to that. And it's really good to be one of those quiet people, because people think you're smarter than you are sometimes, because I tend to be pretty quiet in most meetings. And it's not because I don't have something to say, because I always have something to say. It's because and maybe it's my anxiety. I question now the things that I'm going to say. I've been working really hard on, shutting the ego down. And now sometimes I think I shut it down too much, because now I second guess myself a whole bunch. And I want to sit and think about it and marinate on it instead of just blurting out an answer. I don't know if that's wisdom or if it's just anxiety. I have no idea.
I think it's maturity, wisdom, whatever you say. Again, I'll tell you something, a quick story. I'm a curler, and a curler, the sport of curling and throwing stones on ice, draws a lot of technical people, both engineers, scientists, a lot of IT geeks as well. And it's one of those things, as the conditions change, you might say, hey, I think the stone is going fast, or hey, I think the stone's going slow. You need to constantly be communicating and sharing your ideas so you can change the strategy of the game. Even if you're wrong, at least you're putting out information, and over time, you hone in your ideas more and more each time you speak. But unless you practice and speak up, you'll never know what resonates or what makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So curling, I want to talk just a side note on that, because every Winter Olympics, I'm like, dude, I got to go do that. And and then I forget about it and I don't ever do it. But there's a place. So I live in Charlotte. There's a place not too far from here that has curling, and I've been thinking about, like, that'd be a great date night. So would it be a good date night, or is that just all in my head?
Oh, it's a blast. And you may say, hey, this is a one and done. I've had a blast. I've met some really great people. Or you get hooked on a sport that you can take a lifetime to hone. I know that curling club. I know some people there. You got to try it. It's a bucket list item, a low cost of entry, a great time, and also just great sportsmanship and a great social opportunity. So a lot of people even come to my club, the Cincinnati Curling Club, to try it. And it's a date night, and you never know. Sometimes people actually start going as a member and ultimately even get married sometimes. So it's a great place to meet people as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely need to take my wife there for a date night one night, because I just always, every time it comes up in the Winter Olympics, I'm like, dude, that looks so much fun. I want to go give that a try and just see. It's almost like the we have a lot of axe throwing places around here, and doing that's pretty fun too. But curling is something I definitely want to check out. Let's get back on the leadership and communication, because we talked about sometimes pay attention to the quiet folks. Is there something that quiet folks need to do to make sure their voice is heard, and maybe help us communicate? Because a lot of times in technology, especially as we are becoming a leader and trying to step into that role, we under communicate things, and whether it's anxiety or wishful thinking, because we think this project's going to be on time, so we don't want to communicate that it's not just yet. But how can we maybe be better communicators from a tech standpoint?
So I really appreciate this question, because I too am a recovering technical person who felt very deflated when I would present information and people would either deflect, delay, or take things offline, and I wouldn't get them resolved. So I can completely empathize with that frustration. But what I think is, it may be something in our evolution as a technical leader. We are taught to get the data, dot our I's and cross our T's, present lots of information to back it up, and also these charts. And to us and our siloed thinking, we are absolutely crystal clear about the issue, if it's good or bad, or what the proposal is. What we haven't done very much for these technical leaders, and so I'm speaking to you, might want to think about looking at people that do this well, or add a few more skills, because what's happening is, I think, your great technical knowledge is not connecting or resonating with decision makers or stakeholders. And normally a technical person will talk about, here's my data. It's going up or down. The sky is falling. We need to do X. And we stop there, and often there are crickets, or people don't engage. And what I advise technical leaders is to add a couple more things to your sentences that start to resonate, and if nothing else, will cause a conversation. once you get a conversation going, you've at least moved your idea forward. We need to provide it in the framework of here's my data. It's good or bad. Here's the risk or opportunity of doing nothing or something. And what is the magnitude or impact of this thing if we do or do not do anything? And maybe add some money in there or some kind of ROI language. As soon as you start saying, my customer complaints are going up and it's negatively impacting my customers, if we don't buy this piece of equipment now, that'll have an ROI in about 2 months, we may lose 10% market share and $2 million over the next year. Boom. That's an impactful statement that our technical leaders need to develop that skill.
Yeah. So I got really lucky during my first year of management to get paired with a mentor that was in sales. He was an SVP of sales at the time, and it really helped me because he was able to help me frame conversations, requests, or anything like that in a way like, to look at your audience and how can you, what is most important to your audience? And at the time I was manager for our web and mobile development. Our biggest audience was our marketing group because they were the ones that were requesting things from the website or the mobile apps and things like that. So I would have to figure out how do I need to frame something for their perspective? What's most important for them? Maybe it's views, maybe it's conversion rate, maybe it's, click-throughs or whatever. So how can I frame the concept that we're interested in doing from a technical standpoint to what is important to the person in marketing? And exactly what you said, what's the ROI on that? What's the click-through rate? What's the performance improvements that we're going to see? And, being able to do that, it helped me so much on getting, I don't want to say my agenda, but the things that my team really felt like they needed to do that was best for the business, pushed through for the stakeholders that were involved.
Yeah, and I'll also react to that. While we need your technical details to be spot on and perfect, because if that's not right, they're going to poke holes in that. But really, when you go into some kind of stakeholder conversation, think about your messaging. Your messaging, even if it's not 100% right, but your messaging is actually what your outcome is to try to get through to that other person to think versus just react. And then if you can go over the data, noodle over it, get them some more data, but think about messaging because it's all about relationships. It's not about your data.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was one of the things he taught me was like, it's all about how the person feels at the end of it. You can give them, all the data in the world, but, an example that he always used was, what are we most afraid of when it comes to animals? We're afraid of shark attacks. We're afraid of, bears and things like that. But very few people get killed by bears and sharks, but a lot of people get killed by deers. But they're not afraid of deer, But that kills more people in the United States than sharks and bears combined because, of statistics. We tell people, how many thousands of people die because of a deer, and you're not afraid of it. But in reality, they're more dangerous to humans than sharks and bears. But we're scared of the bears because we hear a story once and we're terrified, and it creates this feeling and this emotional connection to, seeing a shark or seeing a bear.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. It is emotional connection because at the end of the day, they're going to want to work with you on a solution or had good luck trying to get in their door again.
Yeah, and that was another thing. He always talked about how it's not person to business. You're not selling to a business, you're selling to a person within that business. It's always people to people, person to person. So communicating on a one-on-one basis is, usually a better approach than just trying to blanket something out with some data and some statistics.
Yeah. Build friends first, then you can get into the weeds later. So I agree with that. Anytime I start a new assignment, it's going to take me a while to learn the business or learn the technology, but it's easy to spend time with all the individuals that you have to directly work with, and then later all of the stakeholders that might be decision makers. So when you finally come to the table and you think you know what you're doing and how to solve a problem, you've got a little bit of trust. If you have to build trust first at the same time that you're presenting some data, it makes it a little bit more difficult. But if you have that trust first, people will have a conversation versus just reacting to the data you present. So people first, then go for the technical.
Yep, absolutely. So in your book, The CEO's Compass, you talk about how to find a team's current blind spots and determine areas that they can focus to get back on track. on a smaller scale, if we're like the head of software development or the head of IT engineering or something like that, how can we find our team's blind spots and what should we be looking for?
Hmm. I've never been asked that question before, so thank you for that. I mean, blind spots could be things that you just ask people, what do they think, or how would they approach a situation? You should be, as a leader, having one-on-ones with your people. And one of the things I talk about when it comes to engaging with your people is don't just go for the tactical work and not just the strategic projects that you're working on. But number one, you need to be working on personal development. And one of the things I have found is by asking people what they think or how would they approach something, you start to see how they operate. And if they start going to, well, I would get this data and I would analyze it with this platform, and then I would plot it this way, and then I would present it in this kind of form. Yes, technically that may be what is needed. But they didn't say anything about, well, I should be learning a little bit more about my internal customer and what they're actually looking for in terms of user requirements. I don't know that group over there. I might want to spend some time with their leader just to understand what a day in the life is. When they don't start with things like that, you can hire great technical people to do the work. But when they present their work or try to navigate through the things, if they just don't understand their internal users, they don't have good thought logic, good prioritization, those are the gaps or the blind spots that we as a leader need to close. Because a team can get results if they rally around stuff, but you might upset people in the meantime or ruin relationships. We as leaders have to discover those essential skills, those soft skills to navigate through the organization. Those are the gaps that we need to close on. And so often when we hire people, we just hire them for their technical competencies, not their essential skills. So I ask a lot of questions. How do they think? How would they approach something? Then you know what you're dealing with and what you need to build their capability in.
So let's say we're managing a team and we realize that we have some of those blind spots. We haven't built the relationships with, our peers, maybe the people in accounting or finance or internal user base that's using the software that we're writing. How do we go about starting that? Is it just setting up one-on-ones? Is it just having intro calls? Or what is your recommendation for someone to start building those relationships if we don't have them?
Yeah, you're spot on with the one-on-ones. I will tell you a quick story that made my life so much easier. When I was dropped in as the head of quality for an organization, customers were complaining, and even more so, our internal customers, our salespeople, were always coming at me with how to solve this crisis and that crisis. And yes, as a leader, we have to go put out those fires. But after the dust settled, I met with them just to understand what their client base was, what are the issues they're dealing with, what are the problems that they've had in the past to get things solved. I then found those blind spots. I found those areas where maybe my organization needed to be more connected to their organization, have regular touch points necessary to not only get our customers back on track, but what could we do proactively as a partner versus always and only coming together when it was problem solving. So when a new leader gets into a role, find out who is in their immediate ecosystem that they have to work with, set up those one-to-ones and determine how frequently, but then their bosses or critical thinkers. I'll tell you, I just started a new consulting gig and I probably had about 50 one-on-ones within a 2-month period. But now when I was starting to be invited to technical meetings, I already knew the people. So when I spoke, they didn't have to ask me questions about my background. They already knew. They had a level of respect because of my experience, and we were able to move things quicker. So one-on-ones is my go-to, but I am also open for any other suggestions.
So what kind of agenda would you have for those one-on-ones? Is it just like a meet and greet? Is it more formal than that? Or how would we even know where to start?
Yeah, I mean, I've never written this down, so I should probably be recording this and put out a blog post on this, but I always
It's a
start
good
with
thing
this.
I'm recording it for you.
I love creating content. You never know where it'll go. But I mean, I always try to do that, water cooler conversation. Tell me about yourself. Don't just go into your resume. I mean, I always start with family, friends, hobbies, activities. Just find some area of commonality. Sometimes it's a little awkward because we're not taught to operate that way, but just get to know the person a little bit. Yeah, go into a little bit about their background, but I also propose to ask different questions. Don't just regurgitate your resume of where you've been and what you've done, but ask them well-placed questions like, what are you passionate about? What do you love about your work? And conversely, also ask what keeps you up at night? What troubles you? What problems do you have? Because you get people to think and their soul starts coming forward versus technical speak in terms, well, I'm the project manager of a multi-million dollar thing that transcends the globes across 3 different continents, et cetera, and we deliver X, Y, and Z. You know, you don't get a lot from that, but if you know what makes people tick, that's data. And then you can play into that the next time you have a one-on-one, or maybe there is an ask. It's data collection, but you have to do it in a way so you can connect with the emotional side of the person or those things that light the person up when it comes to family or hobbies or things they really love to do.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think building that connection, outside of work and getting to know the way the person responds to certain things is really important to building trust and having that relationship that's going to be longer than just the project. And I think that's important.
Yeah, and again, for a technical leader, we are brought into a project to provide some kind of value or technical solution. And then it's a one and done. You're done with the project, on to the next one. But I will tell you, if you connect with somebody and you have a little bit of commonality, or you have a few jokes, or you swap stories on the same issue, kids playing hockey or what have you, it also creates pull, from lean methodology, there then becomes pull. You become top of mind for that next project or new initiative. So yes, we come together on our project, solve technical issues, but you also need to know how to market yourself. And when you connect with people and they get to know you more personally, you become top of mind and you're the first person to be called for that new and exciting initiative.
Mhm. Yeah, very good. I think this has been a great conversation. A lot of helpful things for people to take away, especially if you're new to a leadership role or in a new organization and you need to build those relationships and how to do that. How can people connect with you online and find out more about what you're doing and maybe pick up a copy of your book?
Okay, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to your audience. Hopefully, I've imparted some thoughts that will help them in their leadership journey. The best way to find me is at my website, the Drop-In C, or actually, it's dropinceo.com. You'll find a link to order my book. I also have a forum, I know you have this as well, where I bring amazing leaders together. It's called the Drop-In Collective, also listed on my website. For once a month, we share these insights, these technical networking skills, education, and even some spot coaching. But the best place, even more than that, is LinkedIn, Deborah A. Coviello, the Drop-In CEO. I respond to all those messages. I would love to get to know you, connect with you, and start a conversation. But again, John, thank you so much for having me on the show.
Awesome. And real quick, the name, the Drop-In CEO, where did that come from?
It was an accident. It was an accident. It was a crazy story. But back in like June 2019, I had just started my business and I was once invited to be on a podcast. And I said, oh, I love this. I love being interviewed. I like to talk, as you can tell. And one of them was the 10-minute mindset. And during the interview, he was asking me about my, what I do. And I said, I'm like the drop-in CEO. I go into businesses or projects or situations and I look at the landscape, solve the business problem, and elevate the people. And when we got off the interview, they said, that was brilliant. I said, what? I said, the drop-in CEO. I said, where did you come from? I said, I don't know. I said, all I remember is early in my technical career, I was with a digital company and it was an optical networking company, and we were in trouble. And they dropped in a CEO who rolled up their sleeves and partnered with the head of quality, myself, and operations, and helped us solve the business issue, but also built our skills and confidence. And then they pulled that CEO out and they dropped in another one to make us bring us to IPO. But I remember how that CEO made us feel and treated us with respect and built our confidence, for which that's the way I operate. I don't just solve a problem, I try to elevate the people and leave a lasting impact. Hence, the Drop-In CEO brand was born. I didn't embrace it until about 5 months later when I figured out the name of my podcast was called The Drop-In CEO. So thank you so much for asking.
That's really cool. I'm glad I did ask that. So I'll link all that up in the show notes too at computer.com so people can go there and check out your podcast and connect with you on LinkedIn and everything else. So, Deb, thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed the conversation.
My pleasure, John. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some T-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.